Good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate your time and interest in joining us today. We will wait a minute or so while everyone gets logged into Zoom for our webinar. As we wait, we would like to share that the California Department of Education, or CDE, is offering professional development certificates to all attendees of this live webinar. Your professional development certificate will be sent from noreply.upk@gmail.com to the email address provided during registration. Please be aware that this is an unmonitored no reply email address. Please do not attempt to contact it. If you do not receive your professional development certificate within the next 2 weeks or by May 20th, please reach out to us at upk@cde.ca.gov. A link to the mailbox will be shared in the chat shortly. Please note that certificates will only be issued to those who attend the live webinar using the name they registered with. So please double check the name displayed in your participant window to ensure it is how you would like it to appear on your certificate. If the name in your participant window is different, please go ahead and take the time now to change it to the name that you would like to be on your certificate. Now we'll go ahead and get started with our webinar. Next slide, please. Welcome to the California Department of Education's Centering and Cultivating Black African American Leadership Roles to Strengthen Preschool through Third Grade Alignment webinar. We're so excited to be here with you today. My name is Valentina Ware, and I work in the Early Education Division, or EED, and I am one of the presenters for today's webinar. We have a few quick logistics to run through before we get started. We will be taking Q&A or question and answer in the Q&A feature, so please feel free to communicate with us there and ask us any questions if you need to. We will do our best to address them. Lastly, we will have the slide deck and recording available on California Educators Together in the UPK/P3 group for those who would like a copy of this webinar. The announcement will be shared via the P3 listserv. If you are not subscribed to that listserv, information on how to join will be added to the chat soon. And it looks like it has just been added. Now, thank you so much for adding that in the chat. I will go ahead and pass it to Dr. Ingrid Roberson, Chief Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction and Deputy Superintendent of the Opportunities for All branch, or OFAB, to provide a welcome. And it looks like the next slide is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina. I'm excited to join all of you today to discuss how we can truly center the Black community by focusing on Black leadership roles in this third and final part of our three-part series. What a joyful topic for a Tuesday afternoon, an incredibly important one as we focus on creating supportive environments for our Black leaders, educators, children, and families. And I just want to say, I think at this time, it is really important that we stand up for justice and stand out in joy. So these are the kinds of webinars we need to continue having and really center our California values. So creating authentically supportive environments, it opens more pathways for Black educators to confidently pursue leadership roles by allowing them to see themselves reflected in their workplace. And it also helps retain them by fostering spaces where they feel comfortable, supported, seen, and valued. This representation has a ripple effect. It positively impacts Black children and families by showing leadership beyond the limited portrayals often seen in media, which tend to focus on sports and music. Now, those fields are valuable. Black children possess brilliance, talent, and potential that extends far beyond entertainment if they choose to explore it. As you will hear from the presenters and panelists today, having more diverse education systems that are visible and felt by all parties involved, including staff, students, and families, will create higher success rates for our young learners. When children have the opportunity to have a Black leader or educator in their educational journey, they are proven to have higher chances of success through increased test scores, a greater likelihood to pursue higher education, and most importantly, a stronger attachment to school and learning. And as we know, for students to learn, we need to make sure they're feeling safe and a sense of belonging. That is necessary, but insufficient. But we want to make sure those things are happening minimally. These are benefits we want to elevate across all early education and elementary school classrooms in California. I hope the resources and perspectives shared today help you incorporate and uplift the benefits of Black leadership in education for all children, and especially our Black children moving forward. Thank you for your time and participation. Please enjoy the rest of this webinar. And now I'm going to pass it on to Steve Profiter for introductions.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today for the Centering and Cultivating Black African American Leadership Roles to Strengthen Preschool through Third Grade Alignment webinar. This is our 22nd edition of the OFAB Pre-Kindergarten through Third Grade, or P3 webinar series. I'd like to begin by introducing myself and today's speakers. So I'm Steve Profiter. I am the proud director of the Early Education Division at the California Department of Education. We are thrilled that you have joined us today. With me today from CDE are William McGee, Director of the Student Achievement and Support Division, Monique Williams, Administrator in the Program Quality Improvement Technical Assistance Office in EED, and Valentina Ware, whom you just heard from. Next slide, please. So I want to begin by sharing why we began our three-part series supporting the Black African American community. Our first webinar focused on centering and cultivating Black families' voices to strengthen preschool through third grade alignment. The second webinar was centering and cultivating the Black workforce to strengthen P3 alignment. And today's webinar being the final part of the series, centering and cultivating Black African American leadership roles to strengthen preschool through third grade alignment. This three-part series was designed to center the Black African American community by intentionally focusing on Black African American joy, excellence, strength, and genius. Our intention was also to foster meaningful partnerships with Black African American families, focusing on Black African American educators by understanding the critical role of Black African American educators in the lives of not only Black African American and Brown children, but all children, and creating ways to empower Black African American leaders within the school community. More than ever, Black African American children and families, educators, and leaders need to feel that their voices are validated and heard. Starting this series with a focus on the children and families, using that momentum and moving into the workforce, and then wrapping it up with a focus on Black African American leadership roles was done with intentionality to show how we can collectively strengthen and transform our California schools by leading the effort on addressing inequities. Next slide, please. Equitable representation in schools means that school principals, teachers, coaches, teachers on special assignments, or other school-based leaders reflect the racial and cultural diversity of the local communities that they serve. Currently, we know there are barriers that limit the opportunity for Black African American educators to become leaders. According to New Leaders Change Everything, these barriers prevent teachers of color from moving into leadership roles. They state that nationally, 54% of all K-12 public school students identify as people of color, yet only 22% of our nation's principals and 8% of our superintendents do. This data shows what is known as the representation gap that we must close by diversifying our leadership, creating equitable representation, which includes increasing the number of Black African American leaders. We know that equitable representation creates more cultural understanding as the leaders have lived experiences similar to those of the students and families they serve. Through their leadership, our Black African American leaders can also help address biases, systemic racism, and inequities to help close the representation gap and set our future leaders up for success. Diversifying your leadership in P3 settings will help close the representation gap. Some ways to do this include having inclusive hiring practices through removing biased language from the job descriptions, having a diverse panel, and reducing unconscious or implicit bias. Professional development for current leaders that focuses on equity and inclusion so that the current leaders have buy-in and see the value of diversifying leadership to be more inclusive of Black African American leaders. Bias awareness training, not only once or twice a year, but instead have these trainings regularly as a commitment to continuous improvement and dedication to addressing implicit biases against Black African American educators. These regular trainings will also aid in creating a more inclusive and safe school culture with staff so that if the opportunity arises for these educators to move into a leadership role, they can do so confidently. Support networks or brave spaces, such as the reflective groups that Dr. Atisha Stewart, Birth to Five Home Visiting Program Supervisor at Children's Institute Incorporated, and Child Development Professor Mentor at Rio Hondo Community College shared with us in our second webinar in this series in November 2023, which was centering and cultivating the Black workforce to strengthen P3 alignment. As Dr. Stewart stated, these groups provide opportunities to share wisdom and process the work in brave spaces that support and validate Black African Americans' unique experiences. I will now proudly pass it to Monique to share out about what actions CDE has taken and to introduce our guest speaker today. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Steve. So what action has CDE taken? The CDE has been actively working to support Black African American leaders and address disparities Black African American students face. State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, has highlighted initiatives aimed at closing the opportunity gap between Black students and their peers. These initiatives also include diversifying the workforce with an even greater focus on male educators. State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, also has additional initiatives to support closing the student achievement gaps that include the Black Student Achievement Task Force to foster Black student achievement in California and bridge the achievement gap between white and Black students, diversifying the teacher workforce, resources for workforce diversification so that California's teachers' populations reflect the current student population, Education to End Hate Initiative, and Initiative to Combat Bias, Bigotry, and Racism Through Education. By providing resources, training, and support to educators and students to create a more just and equitable society. Professional learning and support, which focused on providing proactive teacher support to allow educators to be successful in reaching all students. Creating equitable early learning environments for young boys of color, disrupting disproportionate outcomes. This groundbreaking book provides an honest and comprehensive look at the inequitable experiences our youngest boys of color have in early learning programs, including disproportionate rates of exclusionary discipline. Next slide, please. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker, Dr. Carla Bryant. Dr. Bryant is the Executive Director of the Center for District Innovation and Leadership in Early Education, DIAL-EE, at Cultivate Learning, University of Washington. She has over 30 years of experience creating culturally competent policies and programs for early learning, particularly early learning preschool through third grade, P3, family support, and after-school programs. She founded DIAL-EE at Cultivate Learning, University of Washington, which supports school districts in implementing effective early learning structures for under-resourced communities. Previously, as a chief of the Early Education Department for San Francisco Unified School District, SFUSD, she improved kindergarten readiness benchmarks from 37% to 55% in 3 years, and oversaw the development and implementation of transitional kindergarten. Before SFUSD, she co-created the Seattle Early Education Collaborative, integrating various funded programs into a unified early learning system. Welcome, Dr. Bryant. Next slide, please.
Thank you. If I can figure, oh, there we go. Thank you. First, I'd like to thank my Dow EE team for the support and honest feedback as I prepared for this webinar. And then second, I'd like to thank the CDE team for designing this amazing three-part series. And I have to say, and a special nod to Stephen and Shanna, not only for being part of designing this, but actually modeling the types of strategies that I'm going to talk about around how to support African American leadership. It would be, I think it's very important for me to actually highlight our current state. Since the first two webinars, a lot has occurred in America. And I'm going to call it truly the active erasure of African Americans and their role in America has really taken a lot out of a lot of African American leaders. When I think about all the things that we have been bombarded with, think of the messages that our leaders are hearing. Just basic messages that are just in the air. The dismantling of the African American Museum in DC, the defunding of historically Black colleges, or the attempt to defund African American historically Black colleges and universities, the removal of African American authors from libraries, and the book I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, the removal of African American soldier heroes from national parks and monuments, Colin Powell and Jackie Robinson, the term Black jobs, the way that they narrate our African American females, Jasmine Crockett, Vice President Kamala Harris. What is the word? The most ignorant wimp people. Do you know a DEI hire when you see them? All of this is in the ether, and as our African American leaders are trying to do the work that was so well talked about by Stephen, we have to almost step back and realize that the types of supports that we're going to have to provide for our leaders has to be more intentional. And if you would bear with me, I'd like to share a story that I just recently, a conversation I just recently had with a leader. And this is an African American leader in a district who was working with the individual who was quote unquote underperforming. And it was commonly known within the department that this person was struggling. And after multiple interactions of providing her support, she brought in the union representative to sit with her. And as they were sitting and just talking through the different supports, this individual started to use terms like, she's too loud, she's too aggressive. This is this employee's comment about this particular leader. She started to narrate in such a way that it was all the tropes that we have traditionally heard around African American women. When it was all over, the African American leader says to she says to the union person, so I guess I'm a DEI hire now, that what I bring to the table around supporting this individual is not being heard because I'm an African American leader. So what is happening out there is directly impacting our leaders and how they are going to move forward. So this workshop actually centers around three things. And let me just say this ahead of time. Stephen did a great job of talking about why we need African American leaders. So this will not be a justification about the why. I assume that the why is understood by the individuals on this webinar. And also what it is not going to focus on it's not going to focus on it's not going to focus on all the the negativity in such a way that there are not solutions to it. We're going to definitely call it out because it happens in microaggressions as we talk about it, but it will not do it in such a way that that you will not see how to act on how not to be that individual. So what will it be? First of all, it's going to be, I'm going to share best practices that have been researched, that have been identified not only by researchers nationally, but actually in the state of California. The state of California has done an amazing job and has a lot of resources to support African American leaders. And so I will highlight where those places are. I will also highlight and mention some past webinars, some upcoming webinars or presentations that are available to the individuals on this call. And lastly, as an example of how I will focus on presentations that have happened, because we do have great resources in this state, I'm going to use this as an example to show how I'm going to pull all this together. But I recently sat through a presentation by the National Early Care and Education Workforce Center. They conducted a webinar called Using the Systems Change Framework to Create Intentional change with and for the ECE workforce. And one of the major takeaways that I got from this webinar was that they talked about fixing one part of the system does not change the entire system, that we have to be able to see it in its entirety. And for that reason, the strategies that I'm going to talk about are going to be the strategies that can be used in all three settings: the early childhood education setting, the TK to 12 setting, and higher education. We cannot anymore talk about one without talking about the other two, because each one of those directly impact what happens in the other. For example, if we do not get more African American professors in the higher education setting so they can assist those leaders coming through, we will not get the type of change we have. So what you will not hear me say is, this is just for the ECE. These strategies are for all three of these settings. And the leadership of this is our TOSAs. They are our teacher leaders. They are our principals, our directors. So the strategies are consistent for everyone. So next slide. So how will we talk about this? We're going to do this in three parts. And the three parts are, first, we're going to talk about representation. Because again, we can't solve the problem unless we call it out. But I will provide, again, ideas about how to directly address them. So representation is, what is the current state of African American leadership in these three spaces? What is exactly going on? What does a microaggression look like? And that way we can realize that maybe we could actually stop some of the microaggressions because we can call it out, because we can't change anything if we don't call it out and actually recognize when we see it. The second is those microaggressions, the representation that we see out there also directly affects the experience of the African American leaders. And this is the repressed and the oppressed. And they are two separate things, and we'll talk about the difference. But the experience from the microaggressions have direct impact on how we actually experience the work that we're doing. And then third, we have to talk about the resources and the supports. And I should actually have it reversed. It should be the supports first and the resources, because the supports will come directly from the agencies in which we work in. So next slide. So let's start with the first part, representation. And I think this particular slide really summarizes how we can actually what is happening out in the field. And this comes from the Center for Study of the Child Care and Employment, which I think is an amazing resource that we have in this state. It is one that is recognized nationally, but they do amazing work, and they have actually provided provide us with a lot of information about what is occurring out in the field. So what is the statement? The early educator workforce is racially and linguistically diverse, but that diversity is not distributed equitably across positions within the field. Women of color are overrepresented in the lowest paying jobs, underrepresented in leadership roles, and frequently paid unequal wages for equal work. I think this is a big part of how we actually are represented in the field. We can do the work, but we cannot lead the work. And if we're going to talk about having African American leaders, we absolutely have to interrogate why this is happening. Next slide. So how does this show up in the field? And in this particular slide, we're going to talk about how it shows up in the pay. And let me say this. This is about the economic viability of our communities. African American leaders and teachers are highly likely to be within the community. And one of the things we're going to talk about a little later is how a particular policy directly impacted not only who was actually the leaders and teachers in our schools, but it also impacted our middle class. But that's further. That's something we're going to talk about. But so how are we represented in this right now? Through further education, and so I'm going to read the slide and then just talk about each part of this. Through further education, though further education is typically associated with higher levels of pay, education pay premiums are not equitably applied across various racial ethnic groups. Black lead teachers are not rewarded for obtaining higher educational degrees. Now ponder that. Black lead teachers are not rewarded for obtaining higher education degrees. So we do the work, but we're not being rewarded for it. Black directors were even more likely than white directors to hold a bachelor's degree or higher, but were paid lower wages, $27 versus white directors who were paid $28.70. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot to the person who's getting that $1.70 less than what their counterpart for doing the same work. And white educators are more likely to serve in leadership roles and are consistently paid higher wages across job roles, regardless of their education level. Regardless of their education level. So here we have our Black leaders. They are doing the work, but they're being paid less. And therefore, this has a bigger impact. Now think about this. If we're being paid less in these jobs right now, what is the likelihood of us being promoted to these higher positions? So all of this has a long-term systemic impact. Next slide. And I just want to do a nod to the previous workshops. Dr. Tisha Stewart and Dr. LaWanna Wesley both provided some information that absolutely impacts the conversation we're having right now. So something that Dr. Tisha Stewart shared in the webinar that was around the workforce. United States full-time college and university faculty, as of fall 2021, out of 73, as of fall of 2021, only 6% of that faculty were Black. Now think about it, if only 6% was Black, it was even a slower percentage that was actually focusing on education. So we have even a lower representation there. In 2022, the Learning Policy Institute shared the following: 61% of the TK workforce identifies as white. Only 4% were Black. Why is that important? those 4% become the leaders. So if you think of it as a funnel, if we only have 4% that are actually in the TK and TK to 12 space, you're going to have even fewer who are going to become leaders in that in the TK 12 space. Another a data point that was shared by Dr. Stewart: African American educators feeling the effects of microaggressions in the workplace and discrimination, overcrowded classrooms, lack of support from leadership, they actually leave the profession early. So we have 4% that are in the profession, but they're leaving. So again, that directly impacts what occurs with our leadership and who becomes the leaders. Dr. LaWanda Wesley, in her webinar, shared information about the microaggressions that happen. And we're going to talk about repressed and oppressed as part of those microaggressions. But she was talking about the microaggressions when it came to families. If you go back to what I said about what's in the air around what our current national leadership is sharing about African Americans, that they're DEI, that they're ignorant, all of those kinds of things also directly impact our families, and they directly impact the culture that we're creating in our schools, which then also adds to the pressures that we put on our African American leadership to mitigate all of those pressures. And there's this secondary trauma that is occurring around the leaders having to actually mitigate not only what's happening with the families, but also what is occurring with our teachers. All of this is this extra tax that African American leaders are actually dealing with. And that brings us to our next part, which is the repressed and oppressed. So, repressed and oppressed. Next slide. Repressed. So how are African Americans in the ECT TK-12 and the higher education administrators repressed? This particular comment really summarized that experience. There was a clear notion among the African American women administrators that in order to be a principal, they had to change. And in some cases, they had to hide their professional identity. While the Black men also were faced with rejection and dismissals by white colleagues and supervisors, the difference was that along the pathway, Black women were specifically told who they were was not appropriate or would not last as leadership. If we reflect back on my previous example of this one leader who's just simply providing feedback to her staff member, and this staff member felt free enough to tell her that basically she was a DEI hire. So how was she to take that in? What was she supposed to do? Well, that's the repression. Am I supposed to change my demeanor? Am I dressing the wrong way? But either way, what it starts to tell you is that you cannot, as an African American leader, show up as your genuine self. And that's the beginning of the repression. Next slide. So how does repression and oppression manifest in the day-to-day, aka racial battle fatigue? And we'll talk more about that. So let's talk about the repression. Repression is defined as the action of subduing someone or something by force. And that force is not necessarily physical, it's just by the little signs that you get. So what are examples of how this repression occurs? And let's go back to that. We don't have to go back to, but let's think about that the previous slide. So how am I to show up? Am I to be less like me by changing my hair? Am I to wear different types of earrings? How am I to be less Black? So already I'm just changing my voice, my tone. The next part of that is that then if I'm starting to do that, am I now starting to invalidate my experiences? So when I say to someone that I had to change who I am so I could be more presented or presentable to a certain group of people, is that now invalidating me in my experiences? The other part of being repressed is that we're asked to also do more. We're asked to do more because now we are not only we are now taking care of the African American children because we have that connection with them. We will be asked to also, can you also come in and take care of the children in my room or in my school? Or you will ask me to start, I'm the one who's always dealing with the African American parents. The balance with this is that it now pins me down around what I'm having to do in addition to my regular activities. The other part is that and this is the best way I can describe this, multiple positions. We become the interpreter for our communities. That is as Stephen talked about, that is the good part about having someone who is part of the culture of the children they serve. But it also becomes that part where we're doing almost all of it. It also becomes how we are asked to almost stay where we are so we can do it. And that we are not given opportunities to be in other spaces because we are so needed in the space where we are more culturally aligned. Microaggressions. Microaggressions is that perceived to have less knowledge, where you can actually be in a meeting and people will repeat what you said as though you did not say it in a way that was with English, that you said it in a way that was understood. They will call themselves softening what you have to say. They will actually say, did you mean? And and I shouldn't share this, but I will. My daughter has decided that I need to be on TikTok. And on TikTok, you have people posting how individuals are showing up and telling them, I don't want a Black nurse, or I don't want a Black teacher. Because African Americans are perceived to have less knowledge. Another way that we experience microaggressions is that a person will walk in and automatically assume that I can't be the principal. I can't be the superintendent. I am the janitor. I am the teacher assistant. And all those are honorable things. But the assumption is that is exactly who I am because I cannot be these other positions. All of these things oppress and they take a toll on you. And then when we look to have mentors, a lot of times our mentors may not look like us. And they may not have that understanding. And this is what makes this all so hard, is that we are looking for mentors that look like us. So here we are, we go back up to, we're asking our African American leaders to take on exactly what I was talking about before, which is they're always the ones who are doing that kind of work. And the other side of it is that sometimes our mentors are misaligned. They don't look like us. And so they don't understand the microaggressions. They don't understand the little tiny things that happen. And then they go back to we're right back where we were. They're invalidating our experiences when we do share it with them. When we say, did you hear how that person said that? It will be, maybe you misunderstood. So again, that message is being, again, we have this conundrum that's going on. Next slide. And before I go to the slide, let me define oppression. We can stay on this. Oppression, the malicious or unjust treatment of or exercise of power over a group of individuals, often in the form of a governmental authority. So repression is that day-to-day, that one-on-one. Oppression is when it now becomes part of the system. We're being repressed as individuals, and those repressions are being actually built into the system. And I'm going to quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but I just want to make sure I just bring this up. And let me just offer this up as not as a way of creating a controversy, but just acknowledging something that occurred. And that item was around the issue of around the quality rating system. 3 or 4 years ago, we had an amazing letter that went out by Kaisha Nzewi, Mary Ignatius, and Kim Krunkle, who actually challenged the idea that the QRIS system, which was a policy, was actually a racist system. And this all started when Kaisha uttered a few words on a national webinar that brought the deep introspection around this, where she just simply said, though this is a shocking thing, I believe that this process is racist, and she said, for these reasons. And they took the time to show how systematically this process, though well-meaning, needed to be rethought. This is something we have to do with all of our policies. Another example of this type of policy is something like the Brown versus Board of Education. This was another thing. We were trying to solve for one issue, but what happened is that we created something else. And I need to say that there are some amazing webinars that were done by LPI in partnership with CASA that I would encourage everyone to go back and look at. And what this policy brought up was they saw for people saying, African Americans saying, we need more buses because our children are walking to school. We need better resources as far as books. But the solution that they came up with actually decimated our African American teachers and leadership. And here we are today trying to recapture that. But also what is missed out of that, it also decimated our middle class. So resources and support. Our community is being underpaid, under-resourced, and they are taking this in through these microaggressions. But there are ways that we can solve for this. And so I'm going to spend the last part of my time quickly going through what the resources and supports are. Again, recognizing that I only have about 7 minutes. So what are the so now what? Now what? We know that we're being repressed. We know that we have policies that we need to rethink. How do we solve for this? Next slide. Resources and support. What resources are available to address the underrepresentation of African American leadership in ECE, TK-12, and higher education? What are the supports? And these supports are things that we can do individually in our system. But also I want to provide you with a list of resources. And this is not an exhaustive list of resources. These are just some ideas of resources you can right now go find and utilize. But there are others, and I would encourage people to put them in the chat, or well, I would encourage you to send examples of them to each other. So what are the supports? Next slide. And I want to and I want to use this quote from Dr. Misha Mosley, who is the executive director for the Black Teacher Project. She also works with teacher leaders. Racial affinity professional support at its core is about designing spaces of support, learning, and healthy career development that are culturally responsive to a specific racialized group that experiences the consequences of institutionalized racism in particular ways. Designs intentional spaces. And this was something that Stephen mentioned, but we also have to design this in the day-to-day in our own settings. Next slide. So how can we on the day-to-day help retain our African American leaders? Don't overburden African American leaders. Don't ask them to always be the one that is going to be working with our African American community. Let them lead the space or show you how we can be more effective in it. Ensure leaders are in the room where diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and procedures are discussed. Here's a hint. If you're in the room talking about a particular group and that group is not in the room, you might want to stop that meeting and go find the individuals who you're going to directly impact. There are a lot of policies and actions that happen that they ask us to come back later to solve for. Have us be part of the conversation. Create safe spaces for administrators. Each one of you will have to decide what those safe spaces look like. But you have to ask the individuals that you're trying to impact what they would like to see happen. That's back to have them in the room. Invite the entire person to the agency. This is about, do I show up and do I change who I am to make you more comfortable? You need to be okay with knowing that if there's something about me that you want to know as a Black leader, just ask. But don't ask me to repress myself to make you feel comfortable. Because when I don't bring my whole self to the table, then what you're missing out on is that opportunity where we can learn together. And now you being, and that could be any of us, that could be anyone who's not of the same group. This is where we learn to become allies because you have allowed and have provided that safe space for that African American leader to show up in their entirety. And learn from other leaders. Always go find someone who can help, who can be a mentor to you. And then you become a mentor. You got to give it back. The next slide. Leadership support, allyship, and co-conspirators. I feel it's very important to really talk about these two things because part of becoming that, what we talked about in that previous slide, about letting me show up in my full space, it's about creating these allies. There is a center, the Writing Center, which is called Another Word Project at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, developed a working definitions of ally and co-conspirator. An ally acknowledges and empathizes. Acknowledges and empathizes. That means that as an ally, you are listening. And I would tell you as an ally, stop talking. If you're trying to learn what is important to this group so you can develop those safe spaces, stop talking. Just listen. Seek understanding. Feel free to ask for clarity. And sometimes you got to figure out when you want to ask for the clarity. Do you ask for that clarity in a big group or do you go to a trusted advisor, a peer, one-on-one? But part of being an ally is to know what you ally for. And the only way you can understand that is to just listen. A co-conspirator takes risks, acts, and engages mutually in anti-racism work. That happens as you really figure out how to become an ally. How do I, instead of asking you to take the risk, I take the risk. I got to know when that risk makes sense. There is a story that is told by Bettina Love, and I'm not going to tell it, but I'm going to encourage all of you. This is the story where she talks about the young lady who climbed the pole and a gentleman put his hand on the pole to stop the police from, and she climbed the pole to get the Confederate flag down. And They planned for it, and everybody was waiting for her when she did it. She climbed that pole, and when she went up the pole, the police actually talked about shocking that pole to make her fall down. But instead, an ally who was a white man, and the person who climbed the pole was a black female, he put his hand on the pole to stop them from doing it. She was able to get the flag, bring it down, and that person who put his hand on the pole, they both were arrested, but he went away. And the story stayed about that individual climbing that pole. A co-conspirator is not looking for credit. The co-conspirator is not out there telling everybody, I'm the ally. They just simply do it, and they do it so the ally can not have to always be the one who takes the risk. Next slide. This is a suggestion as I go into the resources. We're at time, and I only have 1 or 2 minutes, and I know that Valentina, but let me just tell everybody about the slides real quick here. As I said, and I'm going to do this quickly, I promise, 2 minutes, Valentino. There are a lot of resources in California, one of them being the CREO Center. And the CREO Center is at UC Berkeley, and they are narrating a lot of the stories. UCLA Center X. Please, guys, go online, look for them. There are a lot of groups nationally and in the state that actually provide a lot of support for African American leaders. NBCDI, National Black Child Development Institute. There are 2 affiliations in the state. And sorry, my ASL. There are two affiliates in the state. One's in Sacramento and one is in Greater Los Angeles. Quickly, the next slide. That's the National Black Child Development Institute. Again, it's a national institute. They have 2 projects. One of them that has fellows. Again, go online, apply for it. It is free. Next slide. Promise Ventures, just like NBCI, they also provide a fellowship, ECE. And again, you can learn more about these online when you have a chance to just pull up the slides. Next slide. And my apologies, National Alliance for Black School Educators. Now, this one focuses on the K-12, but again, they have they do a national conference, and I would encourage people to go to it. You will meet others. You can actually find people to mentor you. The next slide. CASA, bar none, provides some of the best conferences. This is a state organization. It's part of Access, one of the affinity groups. They just recently had a conference. I would, again, strongly encourage you to look at them, especially if you're in the TK-12 space. They are working on building their ECE space. And I would encourage individuals who are in the ECE space to join them and actually start to move that agenda a lot quicker. Next slide. And I'm moving quickly. The Black Teacher Project is dedicated to the culturally relevant and affirming professional development. That was the one that I quoted Misha about. It is located in Oakland. Again, it is a great resource. They work with teachers, but also teacher leaders. Next slide. Diversity and Leadership, the DLI. Also, it's an organization that works with principals. They also have a fellowship that is ending fairly soon here, but part of that is that they have this network of African American leaders where they are narrating their experiences and they act as a collaborative and a collegial group. And then the next slide. There are some local examples, and I would encourage everybody to go visit Pittsburgh Unified School District. UC Berkeley has a great principal leadership program that is based on equity and social justice. And UC Merced is now working on a process to increase increase diversity in the teacher pipeline. And again, the person who's working with that is also at CREO, and that's Dr. Jacqueline Olson. Okay. I'm ending, but before I do, I just have to tell you these three things, and I am done. Valentina. Okay, next slide, real quickly here. And I really believe these three things are important. Next slide. And these are the opportunities. All of that we're working with, we have a chance here. And I'm gonna this is a call to action I'm asking for the community. We have to stop talking about things in disparate ways. We need a group of people who are going to come together, ECE, TK-12, and higher ed, to look at the pipeline and look at how African Americans are experiencing it, so we can make sure that we are feeding that pipeline, that we have ECE leaders who may or may not go to the TK-12, but if they stay in the ECE leadership role, we want to make sure they're adequately paid. And then we need to get those same individuals into the higher ed. That's a call of action. We need one group. The resources I provided for you are all disparate. We need one group that's doing this. Next slide, opportunity 2. We actually need someone to fund this leadership project. It is okay that we think it through and lay it out, but I'm looking for one organization to go after funding and I'm looking for a funder to actually lay it out, allow us to lay out how this pipeline could look. And then that last opportunity is around this. And this is around us being able to tell the opportunity 3, and I am finished, Valentina, and you can go to the next group. Opportunity 3. Which is we have to narrate our story. And the only way we're going to narrate our stories is that we have to do our own research. We have to collect our own data. Part of that first person's job as far as creating that pipeline is to start creating some data from all these different resources, pull them together so we all know we have a place to go find it. That is working with UC Berkeley Child Care Employment Office. It means working with higher ed in other spaces. It means working with these different organizations, but we need some way to narrate and tell our story and to uplift the greatness of our leadership. Okay, Valentina, I'm done. 6 minutes past my time, but if you have any questions, please reach out to me. And I'm sorry for the slow pace in the beginning and the fast pace in the end. But the bottom line to the story is that the call of action is that we have to stop letting other people narrate our story. And if we have not learned that from what's been happening in this last 3 to 4 months, we have to know this. We are in control of our story. So let's take control.
Thank you so much, Carla. Definitely appreciate that super inspirational presentation on centering and cultivating Black African American leadership roles to strengthen preschool through 3rd grade alignment. For our screen share, we can go ahead and move over to slide 34, please. Thank you. The information that Carla shared and her delivery was very important for this topic. And it was not only authentic, but also very practical, a true call to action, right? Now, before we move forward, I want to express my gratitude for the wealth of resources that Carla did provide for us today. We did have to go through them pretty quickly so that we could get to our panel discussion. But we are definitely very grateful for those resources and would like to share that those will be going out in the after webinar resource compendium. So if you did not get a chance to catch all of those in the chat, you will get those in your email after the webinar concludes. Now, additionally, the PowerPoint presentation and recording will be posted to California Educators Together. Moving forward with our webinar agenda, we really encourage participants to use the information shared in this webinar to inform their practice. Use the momentum from today's learning to honestly evaluate your P3 settings, engage in team or personal reflection, and consider how you can increase Black African American leadership roles in your settings and create or improve the current pathways and opportunities to leadership to be more inclusive. Your actions have the potential to impact your P3 settings significantly. So I'm going to go ahead, and because we are getting a little bit short on time, I'm going to go ahead and move us over to our panel discussion. To start the next slide, we will introduce our moderator. Next slide, please. Thank you. Our moderator for today's panel discussion is William McGee. William is the director of the Student Achievement and Support Division in the Student Achievement Branch for the California Department of Education, or CDE. He will introduce our panelists, who will be sharing their insights and expertise through the panel discussion around today's topic of centering and cultivating Black African American leadership roles to strengthen preschool through third grade alignment. Thank you, William, for joining us today. We are so excited to have you moderate this discussion. We know it's going to be a great one. Next slide, please, and take it away, William.
You got it. And thank you, Valentina, and thank you to Carla for that insight. So, Valentina, I know one thing, I need my professional development certificate because I've been taking notes. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all, and I appreciate you all being here with us. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to be here and really explore this important topic. So we are going to get into this panel discussion and make it feel like a home discussion, like we're on the couch with the Warriors game on in the background. I want to introduce our panel, and they will be coming off camera and they will be sharing their insight with you all. First, and I want to also say that I've had an opportunity to meet each one of these panelists, and you guys are in for a riveting, informative discussion. So first off, we have Dr. Ayana Blackman-Bologon, who is an Equity and Access Administrator in Rialto Unified School District. She has been an educator for 29 years, holding many roles, and is passionate about education and currently serves as an Equity and Access Administrator in Rialto Unified School District. She is a published author of several books, devotional, and research articles. Outside of education, Dr. Blackman is the founder and executive director of the nonprofit Emerging Beauty, which specializes in providing community health and youth development and education services. I had an opportunity to meet Dr. Blackman when we were in Upland, and we heard some powerful words from Dr. Bettina Love. So we want to welcome you, and we're going to continue on with our next panelist, who is Keisha Nzewi, and she is the co-founder of Women in Charge of Black Californians United for Early Care and Education, and she is a trustee of the Mount Diablo Unified School District Board. With vivid memories of her family raising money for Jesse Jackson's presidential run and going to the voting booth every election as a child and watching Eyes on the Prize every February, and please make sure you watch that every month for everybody here. From his debut for the last 3 years, Keisha couldn't help but spend her career standing up for what is right and just. She works across many sectors, bringing her experience in advocacy, policy, and community with her. On the next slide, you'll see our next panelist. And this panelist is a superintendent, and this topic was so important for her that she stated, I have to leave at 4:45. She changed some stuff up, you guys, just to be with us. So we appreciate her giving her time. But if you do see her depart Zoom, just understand that she had another commitment that she pushed back for us, which is Darnika Watson, who is the superintendent of Glendale Unified School District, which is the third largest district in LA. Darnika and I share a special memory. And so I appreciate her being here, and thank you for that. And finally, Dr. Shiraki Holly, who I've had the privilege of working with. And anytime that I've called Dr. Holly, he answers a phone, very renowned, and is an esteemed educator and author with over 3 decades of experience, passionately advocating for culturally and linguistically responsive teaching practices. And Shiraki founded the Center for Culturally Responsive Teaching. So I could have gone on with everybody's introduction. Is everybody on camera now? Because I can't see, but we're going to start this discussion. If you all will stop sharing the slides so we can see our esteemed panelists. And so we have several questions, and as you all are listening to this conversation, please put your question in the chat. We heard Dr. Carla talk about repressing, and this is a repression-free zone. So we are going to be repression-free in here, and we're really going to talk. So early childhood education, and I thank my colleague, Stephen Profiter, who's director of the Early Education Division, and Shanna and Valentina for their work. Let's talk, you guys, because my mother retired after 40 years of being a preschool teacher. She became a kindergarten and first grade teacher. So let's talk about, in your opinion, what systematic change would create more options? And Darnika, do you mind if we start off with you on that question? What do you think are systematic changes that need to happen?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Darnika Watson, the very proud superintendent of Glendale Unified School District. Definitely an honor to be here. And I'm on a panel with so many wonderful forces. And to be in the presence. And, it's unfortunate, though, you asked me to go first because I didn't want to follow Dr. Carla Bryant. Next time, I'll help you guys reorder this structure. Oh gosh, don't get me started in leadership. I'm so fortunate to be in this space. I have been an educator for over 31 years now, and I am my second year as a superintendent. And I think what's important for us to understand as educators to move confidently in this space. Dr. Bryant hit a lot upon it. We need to see faces in these spaces, and we need to encourage others to move into these spaces and have opportunities for professional development and mentorship. Dr. Bryant mentioned about CASA. There's NABC out there and CABC, all of these wonderful organizations that do amazing things in terms of professional development to make sure that we as leaders are in the forefront so that we're able to present to one another, that we're able to engage in conversation with one another, and we learn about the journey getting here. Again, in 31 years, I'm in a district that does not look like me. I serve over 26,000 students in a sundown town that was once a sundown town, predominantly Armenian and 1% Black. And so when you think about having courage to go into those kind of spaces, let alone be recruited into those kind of spaces, we have to have opportunities to share our stories, talk about our journeys, talk about the things that could hold us back, but why we need to keep pushing forward. So I think we have to be intentional about creating spaces for us to see each other and opportunities, have to see how we grow, how we flourish. And I can go on and on about this. And I have so much one day in a different platform to share my story and my journey and how we cannot allow fear to keep us out of these roles. And I think that's going to be critical as we move forward and share our stories. We can't let fear impact us and don't think that we do not belong in these roles. I'll stop here in the interest of time.
Okay, and we know you have more to share, and I believe what you mentioned too was just about moving confidently in these spaces and having the courage, because I heard Carla mention about being less Black when you guys are in these spaces, when we're in these spaces. And to me, being less Black means being less excellent. And so let's not trade that off and be courageous. Maybe we can ask Ayana if she wants to contribute to this question. Ayana, anything systematic that you can think of that LEAs districts need to do to support with Black leadership?
Of course. Greetings, everyone. A couple of things that stand out to me systematically from a personal as well as professional standpoint. From a personal standpoint, we have to be the leaders that create and nurture our own pipelines. It should be an obligation for us to make sure that we are mentoring someone, that someone's pulling behind us, and that we're providing opportunities for them to shine. On a professional level, we definitely have to belong to systems. I heard the mentioning of the National Alliance of Black School Educators. There's an opportunity with for organizations to start their own Alliance of Black School Educators. We've done that in Inland Empire. We have the Inland Empire Alliance of Black School Educators. And one of the pillars is to make sure that we're mentoring and we're providing professional development. So those are kind of things that we do from a systemic lens, as well as within the system, providing opportunities for teachers and, not researchers, but teacher leaders to have a seat at the table with us. And if there's no table, create the table, figure out a problem we all can solve and be innovative. So those are 3 different ways from a personal, professional level that I would chip in to what Danica said.
No, thank you for that. And I think that also resonates with something Carla said, right? Because you said, if you're not at the table, create the table. And we have CTE programs where our students can learn how to build these tables that we can sit at. But if we're not in the room, get in the room. And as you mentioned, creating our own pipelines and things of that nature. So thank you for those systems level changes. Let's continue this conversation. And remember, I told you we're at home on the couch. Warriors game is in the background on mute, right? Get this professional development credit. Shiraki, I want to jump to you with this next question. So did your leadership journey include supportive and equitable experiences? And if so, please share how your experience influenced your pathway to leadership.
Thanks for the question. So blessed and honored and humbled to be with all these queens, William.
Yes, sir.
I think, as I think about my path, I feel like I was allowed to be my authentic self in each of my roles as a leader, and mainly because I was always connected to the work that we do. And wherever I felt like that wasn't going to be the case, I decided not to pursue that avenue of leadership, because of that authenticity that Dr. Bryant spoke about is so important. And I think that part of the issue is, from a system standpoint, to kind of go back to the last question, we certainly have not really explained what I would call Black authenticity to the system. And the system therefore cannot appreciate what you don't understand. And there's still an association of Black authenticity to what was mentioned earlier about a brother. It's about sports and art and movies, Hollywood. But when it comes to, she gave a specific example where the administrator was called too loud. That's a direct hit on Black authenticity. And because it's not understood, then we stay in the cycle. So for me, I always felt like I had to go into situations where Black authenticity was understood. And that allowed me to kind of flourish as a leader. And I realize everyone doesn't have that, I'm gonna call it privilege, right? And so I want to say that knowing that I had some opportunities to make choices where I felt like I could be in a place where I could be myself. So I say that we have to, from a system standpoint, we got to work on understanding what Blackness is. And then for individuals, you got to chart your path where you think you can be authentic. The danger is going into a situation thinking that you can be you and then quickly realizing it ain't gonna happen. And then you're kind of stuck.
No, thank you for that. And like I said, we're on the couch. Some more people just came in the room, Shiraki. I'm telling you, the room is lighting up. So I told you guys, this is a conversation. Keisha, I met you and I was happy when we were able to connect. Will you talk a little bit about that question? Like, what is your leadership journey? And share your experience for the audience, for the team.
So I'm not an educator. I don't have a doctor before my name. So what I can tell you, my own personal journey, I've been repressed just like any of us, I've changed all those things that Dr. Carla said. I've done it, been there, done that, stopped doing it quite a number of years ago, which led to, I'm the woman in charge. That's my title. That's not part of the organization's name. So that led to Black Californians United for Early Care and Education. And part of what resonated with me with what Dr. Carla said about how we as professionals, you all as educators, as leaders are repressed, is that then that repression trickles down to our children. And as we've all talked about, as she talked about through her presentation, but as we know, as we experience as being part of the system, as well as being parents in the system, as well as having been children through the system, it is so unlikely for us in California to have a Black educator. It's very likely that your only Black educator is in early childhood, because that's where we are the professionals. We are overrepresented actually in the workforce in early education. But what we've allowed to happen is this system looks down upon early educators, doesn't value early educators, and doesn't value their leadership, as she demonstrated with even just the wage issue and the education issue. But our K through 12 system also doesn't value our Black early educators. That although they may be master degreed and doctor degreed, because they don't have a credential, they can't teach 4-year-olds, or their teaching isn't quality, quote unquote quality. I did not mean to use that word. To know means to know. I did not mean to use that word. And so I think that as Black leaders, we have to, one, check ourselves. Like she did not say this, but all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And we often uphold that repression. We ourselves might repress our own Black children. We ourselves might repress the teacher that could be an amazing leader, but she might be a little too loud, a little too Black. But she's exactly what we need. And she's exactly what our children need, and especially our youngest children.
No, thank you for that. And I believe you hit on a variety of points. And as I stated, this is a real conversation. Make sure that you send this webinar to somebody who needs to hear it, because again, these are systems level ideas that you all can implement to really support Black leadership. Darnika, do we have you for maybe about another 47 seconds before you have to get off? Can we ask you one more question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so why don't you kick us off? Talk to us a little bit about how you and your district or any programs that you've incorporated Black or African American leadership into the learning environment.
Yeah.
What impact have you seen on Black children?
Okay, I'd like to talk about this. Lately, in my talk to my African American community, I run with this quote written by Marianne Williamson, but made famous by Nelson Mandela. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And I say this, and it's so important in the community that I am for the 1% to 2% African American student population that I serve. They're voiceless. And they needed to understand their value and their worth. So there has been time in the history of this district working to move and supporting student achievement. However, it was kind of slow to move. We just needed the right team members in place. And so I'm grateful to say that this past year we have done that. And in the history of Glendale, we started our first student parent, our African American student parent council. It has been amazing to get all of the African American parents that we could tap into one space. It was amazing to see how they couldn't understand that there were that many Black folks in Glendale and that their children were in the same spaces. And so we built off of that, encouraging them to find their voice. When I got to Glendale, it was very easy to stand in the back. Or notice a family member standing in the back or saying, no, we just don't want to get involved and we're quiet. And I told them I no longer need them to be quiet. Their voice matters in these classrooms. Children need to learn to advocate for themselves, and parents, you need to learn to advocate for them. So there's just, with as we speak about hate speech and language and all of that information they have to own to what it looks like for them and speak against it, so to speak. So we have created avenues, workshops, opportunities for our African American students and communities. And what the impact, I've seen our students taking flight. I've seen our students creating Black student unions at their schools for the first time and having full programming for the first time. And it has been absolutely amazing. We keep encouraging it. We are going to have a bridge ceremony, so to speak, where we will deliver kente cloths to our graduates, a ceremony of student performances. And so these are some of the first that we're having in Glendale, and we just need momentum. Black faces don't always need to lead this project. I need to set the stage so someone can continue the work that's been set forth and put forward. Sorry about that. And so it's just amazing to see also not just our students finding voice, but our parents finding voice as well, to be able to speak up and advocate and learn. I also saw a piece where we were battling over A through G, and why are we so ill represented in terms of our A through G courses? Why are not more African American students taking these courses? And so we took deep dives in data to educate our parents around the work and why they need to be more active, why they need to make sure that they are part of these spaces where they can achieve as well. So those are some of the things that we've started that I've seen and has made quite an impact in terms of moving our African American community.
No, and thank you for sharing. That's off the hook. And we know you have to sign off. And I will be giving you a quiz, so you need to make sure you watch the rest of this webinar, okay? But thank you for being here with us.
I hate to have to leave, but I have a board meeting calling my name. I'd much rather stay here. You know that, though. But wish us well. All right. It's nice to see everyone, and thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you. And our sign language interpreters, Carol and Sydney, they're working overtime, and we appreciate their help. So, panel, we can keep this conversation going for another 3.5 hours. However, this is only the beginning. As mentioned, the Early Education Division has been great in supporting Superintendent Thurman's vision about how to support Black student achievement and Black educators. So as we close the panel out, and for everyone who stuck with us, again, thank you. Please put any questions you have in the chat, the Q&A, because our panelists will definitely answer them. Why don't we do a round robin? And Shiraki, as you mentioned, we have our queens on this call, so maybe we could start with Keisha and then go to Ayana and then go to you. So as we finalize our discussion, and Darnika just said it, greatness does not come without struggle. If you could go back to a challenging time in your leadership journey, what piece of advice would you give to yourself, and what piece of advice would you give to those districts and people supporting them? Ayana, you want to start us off? I can't even remember who I asked to start us off. I'm so excited.
You asked big brother, Dr. Holly, but I can definitely take it if he's not ready.
No, I'm ready.
Okay, take it away.
So the biggest struggle, man, that's a tough one. I think for me, the biggest struggle was we had, found and started our own independent charter school known as the Cultural Language Academy of Success. And in that, I had many hats as leader. I was one of the founders. I was one of the principals, if you will. I was over, curriculum and instruction, hiring of teachers. As anyone who knows, when you're doing charter, you're kind of wearing multiple hats. But where I was not successful was understanding the bureaucracy of running a school as it applies to fiscal matters and dealing with, quite honestly, like CDE, LEAs, and our authorizing body, which was LA Unified, of course. And that was a real struggle for me because I felt like the system was we were doing something very positive for African American children. We were making a difference. We were a national laboratory school for what cultural linguistic responsiveness looked like, but yet most of our struggles came when we were dealing with the bureaucracy. And as a leader, that was a real struggle for me, because it was how do you say, disillusioning. It just caused a conflict for me, and because we were really doing so well. And so I think that I didn't navigate that as well as I should, thinking back. I mean, this was 20 years ago, but I would say as a leader, that was one of my biggest struggles. How do you deal with the system that seems kind of stacked against you when you are doing so well, which is our goal with African American students?
No, and I appreciate that open and honest reflection. And I think that gives us a lot to contemplate and figure out, how do we enable these systems changes? So thank you for that. Ayana, you want to jump in there and then we'll follow it up with Keisha?
Sure. I would say one of the struggles for me, I'm in a position now where equity is the reactionary word to seeing each student. And it shouldn't be. It should be about systems change and access. And I should have started having these conversations earlier. I would tell myself, and looking back at 30 years in education now, I would tell myself, trust your first instinct and go with your gut and speak up sooner, because every classroom is not like your classroom. I had the assumption that, everyone was educating, each child, and everyone was loving on our children like I was, and they weren't. And so I would say, trust your first instinct, get in the habit of not questioning yourself, making sure that you're not second guessing being in the room, because a lot of times you get in these spaces and you think, am I supposed to be here? You have that. I forgot what the term slipped my mind right now, but the idea is that you're not supposed to be there. But then when you get there, you realize, I'm just as smart as everybody else in this space, and I deserve to be here. And I know Bettina Love, when we went to go see her, one of the biggest things that she was making sure that we knew, like, we have compassion, we have the education, we have the history behind us that are, it was already gifted to us. We just need to, walk in it and be careful to protect our babies from being spirit murdered, and making sure that that you're there to heal and not harm. So I would just say, trust my first instinct and speak up a little bit more, and don't assume that everyone's loving our Black babies like I was. So those are some of the initial things.
No, we appreciate that. And again, this is deep self-reflection. I mean, from Shiraki to what you said, get into the habit of not questioning yourself. That's really holding up that mirror and getting that confidence. And I remember when Bettina said that, like, I fought so hard to get in the room. And when I got in there, I said, this is what y'all talking about? So how do we shape that conversation? So Keisha, we're going to ask you to close us out. Again, greatness does not come without struggle.
No. I would say to myself, to my younger self, in any time that I found a challenge, is that challenge was meant to be, because it drove me to be where I am today, where I'm a co-founder of an organization, where I'm the woman in charge, where I get to do nothing but stand up for our youngest Black children, Black families, and Black early educators. That's my literal job. And I can do that without apology, without fear. Is who's going to fire me? My board, but they're not. And it puts us and all of those angsty things that happened back in the day, all of those challenges put me in a spot today. Now I'm going to put a plug in. This is the really smooth segue to that. I will lead an organization that will launch the second cohort of the Institute for Culturally Affirming Practices for Black Children, which is a 5-session, 10-hour professional development for anyone who loves on young Black children, to be able to bring those culturally affirming practices into their work. And if not for all of those hard times, challenges I had in my own personal leadership journey, that wouldn't exist today. So look out for it. Registration open the week of Juneteenth. That will be the lowest price you'll ever get.
No, thank you for that. And you said something that resonated with me. Beside the woman in charge, but that challenge was meant to be. And so again, I told people they need to be taking notes. This is the best professional development that you're going to be getting. And Stephen, I know I need my certificate, so make sure and grab what's in the chat. It's so funny because I'm looking at the chat while I'm moderating, making sure I'm getting the links myself. But again, that challenge was meant to be. And how do we then support people who are leading our districts, people who have the, as Shiraki mentioned, the bureaucratic part of the institution? How do we understand what needs to be changed? So like I said, this panel could have continued for another several hours. Again, the webinar will be made available. Will you all please put those slides back up and show some love to our panelists? You know, light up those reactions. I see the hearts and the hand clapping. Yes, light it up for our panel. So we're going to share screen again. And before I turn it back over to my colleague, I believe I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. As mentioned at the start of the webinar, we are excited to offer professional development certificates to all attendees who attended this live session. Your certificate will be emailed to the address in which you use for registration. And if you don't receive it by May 20th, please contact the UPK mailbox. The link to the mailbox will be shared in the chat. And then again, a reminder, certificates will be issued under the name used to register. So you can't pass these certificates along. And I want to say thank you to that panel again, Darnika, Kaisha, Ayana, and Shiraki. And I just want to say I'm happy that I had the opportunity to share space with each one of you all. You've supported me with my learning, and you've also supported everyone who works on behalf of California's children. So Valentina, Stephen, Shanna, thank you guys for your work, and I will turn it back over to you all.
Ooh, wow. Well, William, that certificate's coming. What an amazing job you did moderating, and you were in the chat, you were everywhere. Such a great discussion and great content today. I want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone that made this webinar happen today. I had a number of takeaways personally from this webinar, but most importantly, I think is like the underlying is the importance of Black African American leadership. The wisdom and brilliance of Black African American leadership was not just evident in the leaders on today's webinar, but the impact of these leaders on our learners. To our presenters, you have our deep appreciation for the time you took to speak to our P3 webinar participants. Thank you, Dr. Carla Bryant, Dr. Ayana Blackman-Balogun, Kaisha Nzewi, Dr. Darnika Watson, Dr. Shiraki Hawley. I think just a couple of things I heard from Dr. Hawley and Dr. Balogun at the end here today reminds me of something else that I read from Glenn Singleton, and that's just believe me. Believe yourself, right? Believe. To all of the participants on today's webinar, thank you for your attendance and many of the comments or questions we saw in Q&A. We know your time is precious, and we appreciate you taking time in your busy day to attend this webinar and to hear this content. I'd also like to thank our CDE team, who without them, this webinar would not have been such a great success. So William, Shanna, Monique, Beth, Valentina, Anna, Teresa, Nicole, Stacy, Kate, Sarah, Jennifer, our ASL team, our technology services department. So many great minds working together to make this event happen. Thank you to the entire team, and thank you to all of the participants for your time today. We greatly appreciate you. And before I go to the next slide, before I go to this next piece, can we move to the next slide? Perfect. I wanted to make sure we had this quote up there. So I'd like to leave you now with a quote from Bettina Love. A truthful, equitable, and culturally appropriate education is understood to be a basic human right, and not only a condition of Black people's individual success and collective survival. It is also fundamental to civilization and human freedom. Thank you again, and have a great evening, everyone.